It's no secret. Clean energy faces its fair share of headwinds in Washington. The outlook looks choppy at best, with incentives expiring and developers facing significant financial pressure. But there's an often overlooked area of the market that appears surprisingly optimistic. There's growing momentum behind the push for energy sovereignty, tribal nations in pursuit of more reliable and cleaner power. I'm John Engel. You're watching Critical Path, a show designed to unpack the untold stories of the grid. On this episode, I'm joined by Bob Blake, the executive director of the nonprofit Native Sun and founder of the clean energy developer Solar Bear. Native-born himself, Blake turned personal tragedy into a life mission to fight climate change and transform tribal communities. We'll take you inside the movement, one that's positioning tribes to cash in on the AI data center boom. For all that, here's Bob Blake. Bob Blake, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you.
Hey, great to be here, John.
Really excited to be chatting about energy sovereignty and momentum that we're seeing in the marketplace among tribal nations. You're obviously seeing it. I think you're what I would describe to this audience as a bit of a rock star in this world. So it's fortunate for OATI to even be connected to you on this project, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes about electrification of transportation and what that opens up for tribal communities. And the conversations you're having as part of Native Sun with each of these tribal nations. Before we get into all that and like technical specs and what the project looks like, all that kind of stuff, the more important story and the more interesting story, I think, is your career navigation and kind of how you landed in this world, and have really had some prolific success in talking about energy and resiliency and clean energy with tribes. So let's start there. What was your hook, your entrance into energy, and what's kept you here for so long?
Yeah, great question, John. I think what's really how I got here, how and why I'm still here, was the it started really with the death of my brother
Hmm.
and me becoming a surrogate father to his kids. And I'm looking at these kids and his kids, and I'm like, this unbelievable protective feeling came over me. And I started to think to myself, like, what can I do to help them to, so that they can have, a good future. And I decided to tackle climate change, not really realizing that this was a very big problem.
Yeah, at least you took on something small. That's
Yeah,
what
at
they
least I
always
took
say. Find something manageable. That's how you avoided stress and anxiety and not maybe the greatest challenge that has ever faced humanity.
right. And I say this all the time, like I just wanted to do something solid for them. I didn't imagine that this was such a big problem. And I started to just imagine this polar bear talking to me with sunglasses. And he said, "Hey, Bob, we should create a company called Solar Bear and like save the planet." And I started to think to myself, okay, hold on. I am going crazy. But what's really interesting, John, is my brother who passed away was always that North Star for me. He was
Hmm.
always that person that was always pushing me to do better, to be better. And it was amazing now that I think back at this, because I've taken a few psychology classes, John, but I think back to this now, and I literally replaced my brother with Solar Bear.
Hmm.
And grief, John, is an amazing thing. Grief is
Yeah.
really weird. And you don't know you have grief. But the way that I dealt with it was I was like, I have to do something. I can't just go advocate for something. I have to build something. I have to put something together. And I read a book called The New Green Deal, um, by Van Jones.
Hmm.
And I said to myself, could I do this in tribal country? Could we put, there, it, for all intents and purposes, I thought that there was a human health crisis happening in tribal country. And can renewable energy be the catalyst to solve these problems? Could it create workforce development? Could it create economic development? Could it give purpose to individuals that feel like they have no place in society? Could it could it create a circular economy where the outside forces aren't always preying on these communities and they can set the stage on how they deal with the outside world? All of this is happening, John, and I'm looking at these kids, right? And so fast forward now, Solar Bear is doing what it's doing. Created a nonprofit called Native Sun to continue this work, and I have since out of those four kids, three of them have graduated from college.
Hey, you did it.
Yeah,
You're doing
yes,
it.
I got the fourth one in college right now, and
Congratulations.
I'm so proud of them, John. And and the work that I thought that I couldn't accomplish back then is happening with great partnerships like with OATI. And I'm telling you, John, it's just been a really, really wonderful adventure. But it all started with just I felt like I knew something was wrong. I think us human beings, we're like gut bacteria,
Hmm.
in the stomach. And so like when I feel like when the world is off, we're off. When the world is on, we're on. Like our guts, when our gut is off, we're off. And
Hmm.
so and I felt and I knew something was wrong with the climate. I just didn't know what to do. And like I said, ever since then, my life has changed, and it's just been such a great journey.
So pre Solar Bear and Native Sun, any touch point at all to energy? Like, did you know anything before opening that Van Jones book?
I used to go to Barnes and Noble in Roseville, Minnesota, and I used to pick up like whatever was there just so I could just read something, and I picked up Solar Power World,
Hmm.
and not knowing 5, 6 years later I was going to be in Solar Power World, but I was one of those people that was reading this magazine, and it really just it really just clicked. Like I was like, could this really change a community's future? Could we get the technology to create our own renewable energy distributed energy resources? Um, and will there be companies that will come along and do this, such as OATI, right? Like, you guys do this stuff, and like at the time, I had no idea that this was burgeoning up, and um, it's just been amazing to see the technology and the advances of all this happening right now. And so, yeah, it's been just so exciting, John.
And the impetus being around, how could I do this for tribes? Like that was your niche. So your background too, even personally. I think there's value in the messenger on these ideas and opportunities being someone familiar in that it's because I think there's always skepticism of outsiders and like, what are your motives and what are you trying to get out of me? I think that's been a narrative that's been out there. So like your approach and your own personal background, I'm sure resonates with the tribal communities.
Oh, John, I mean, I'm right guy, right time. That's
Hmm.
all it is. I mean, anyone could have done what I've done, but I mean, it's just the timing of everything and the ability for the technology to have come along. And, and once again, like you guys do this, like, back then, it wasn't really happening, but now it's here. And I always tell people it's like, I think it's called the Moore effect. Like every 2 years, like things get like better, like with technology. And, that's exactly what's happening in this industry.
Yeah.
And so it's been really super exciting to see this, and for the tribes to sit there and say, "Wow, we've got a guy, we've got one of our own that is involved in this, that is doing this," because for the most part, John, it, traditionally we've kind of been left out of the conversation. We haven't been able to participate in a way that we would like to. And for us to be able to implement this technology into our communities, for our tribal citizenry to learn how to do this, to operate the systems with the assistance like from OATI, we've been able, we're being able now to really do things on a level that we've never been able to do before. So that's what's really exciting about this, and I think, John, that this gets at a much bigger problem, in that giving folks purpose and jobs and a reason to get up every morning. We call it in tribal communities finding your place in the circle,
Hmm.
but to the outside world, it would be a productive citizen of society, you know, and those things matter, right? And so for these opportunities to learn this technology, to implement it, to work with it every day, is just, I think, is just really exciting for tribal communities.
Yeah, and like I said, we're seeing a ton of interest from tribal communities, whether it's EV charging infrastructure or microgrids around, gaming facilities or communities or whatever. I mean, it's an economic engine, but we also know that, access to electricity and reliable electricity improves outcomes, health outcomes. And you were talking about those health disparities, that there's, a human health crisis on many reservations. Um, and I want to dive into that a little bit further. We should probably talk about at least the nature of the relationship between Native Sun and OATI a bit, and I think that'll dovetail really well into the broader themes of energy sovereignty and kind of what could come next, which is really exciting. So, my understanding is there's a pool of grant funding, and Native Sun has received kind of federal authority to distribute a good chunk of change amongst reservations that are interested in EV charging. So it's like a very low risk, no cost entry into electrification is the framing that I've heard around, Native Sun can approach and say, here are the opportunities with EV charging, um, low upfront to get involved. And then beyond that, you really open up a world of opportunities when it comes to additional resiliency use cases and electrification. But not sure if you would color it a different way, but I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. Like that is the crux of it, right? You explained it, but it actually started, with what was happening in North Dakota with the Dakota Access Pipeline, and with in Minnesota with the Line 3 resistance,
Hmm.
and it was those opportunities to on my part and many others, to offer our um, you know um, uh, to protest, to speak up in opposition
Hmm.
of those two projects. And we were there one day, and all this was happening, and we were just thinking to ourselves, there's got to be a better way to do this. And we looked on the federal grants page, and we saw an opportunity for electric vehicle charging stations. And right away, I thought to myself, well, if they're going to be building pipelines, then we can build an electric vehicle charging station pipeline, and we can connect all the tribal nations, and we can allow people to make a choice whether they want to continue to drive fossil fuel vehicles or if they want to drive electric vehicles. And we will call this project Electric Nation, and not knowing that this was going to be the highest awarded project out of Washington D.C. And Secretary Granholm and Vice President Harris made the announcement, and not knowing that this was going to be one of their favorite projects that they funded, because they felt like this is just another form of native opposition to the fossil fuel infrastructure, right? And so all this is happening, and really it just started with just us trying to say, let's create another way. Let's create another way to do this. And this was also, in my mind, a way that I felt like tribal nations could lead the way, right? And so this all started happening, and we got awarded, and it's just been a really exciting project. And we're so happy that we're able to partner with OATI on this because I feel like OATI brings like so much more to the table than just another, um, you know, uh, charging, network,
Yeah.
and the opportunities to do microgrids, the opportunities to do renewable energy projects, solar, whatever it is, because every tribal nation is different. They have geothermal, they have wind, it could be whatever, hydro. But the point being is that you guys are able to kind of take everything in these like separate areas and streamline them for the communities that you're serving. And my hope, John, in the future is that we could then eventually create a consortium of tribes that will then as they're powering their communities with renewable energy, they can then pool their power eventually, and we could sell it on to the big guys out there on the stock market, just like all the other energy companies do. And
Yeah.
that is where OATI plays. And that's what the tribes that I'm explaining to them, this is the big picture. This is where we
Yep.
start, but this is where we end up at. So that's what's really exciting about this partnership with OATI.
Yeah, and it is kind of crazy though that the thread can start with a couple of EV chargers on your tribal lands and could end up in your trading power in wholesale marketplaces.
Yep.
Because yeah, go ahead.
And John do you remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Of course, I quoted it 2 days ago. Every time
Yeah.
I drive by corn, I tell my son, "Is this heaven?" He goes,
John,
"What?" I'm four.
John, and what I'm saying here, John, is like if you build it, they'll come,
Yeah, that
right?
is the
If
thought.
we
Yeah,
just start with a charging station, right, and we just start with that relationship and that education, the rest will come.
yeah.
And that's the exciting part about doing this project and hopefully seeing what happens in 10 years from now, because it's where we're at right now, John, to where we're going to be at in 10 years, I swear is going to be like mind blowing. And I always say this, John, we tribal people, we tribal communities are in the gaming business. That's $1 billion industry, John. Okay. But we need to be in the energy business. That's $1 trillion business. And I say to Native people all the time, we are in the wrong business.
And I think the follow up to that, like the deeper context, is that this energy sovereignty, it may sound like a catchphrase, but there's a lot to unpack there. It's not just access to reliable power, which is like a foundation. It should be a right to all humans. And we know that the power quality on tribal lands is not at par with non-tribal lands. I think that's pretty clear and obvious in many cases. But energy sovereignty goes so much further that it's an economic engine that, the EV charging infrastructure, for example, bringing in visitors across those boundaries to charge their vehicles, and then that being the entry point into other aspects that the tribe has to offer. From there, you get into the microgrid and on-site resource conversation and solar and storage and gas in some situations. And then you start to have a unique position at the bargaining table that service utilities on the outside have to start listening to you a little bit more about your concerns about power quality, or your requests, because you can potentially leave as a customer, or you can take customers from them. I've heard anecdotally, and I'd love your insight here, that data center developers, hyperscalers, who we know are pursuing access to power above all else, are going directly to tribes and saying, that utility down the street says it's going to take me 4 years to interconnect. Can you do it in 18 months? Because of your access to these resources, because of your microgrid. So there's new revenue opportunities that are emerging, and I think that's the exciting element here as part of this energy sovereignty. It's not just we want to be left alone and we want to have good power. That, that's kind of one aspect, but there's so much more.
Exactly, John. Perfect. Like, and that's why we need partners like OATI, right? The technology is what enables us to do all this. And what's really exciting, though, just like you said, is tribes have land. They have access to transmission. They have site control. Boy, you get those three things, you can build yourself you can build yourself renewable energy projects. And that's what developers, data centers, green steel, all these folks really realize that one of the really, great things about partnering with tribal nations is they can streamline these processes, right? They can, move them quicker and faster than traditional folks could possibly do it. So that's what's really exciting. And they know they know, I think most of us know that a lot of the problems that plague tribal communities have been, these social ills like drug addiction, alcoholism, missing or indigenous women. I believe, John, that we can directly trace all these problems to poverty. Okay. So I think the misunderstanding here is Bob Blake is really trying to build renewable energy projects and solar and everything. You know what Bob Blake is really trying to do? Bob Blake is trying to fight a human health crisis that's happening in his community, and he believes it's directly related to poverty. And he thinks renewable energy and these systems that we're talking about can cure this problem, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the big like aha here.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is your story began by saying you felt compelled to create a better planet, or be a shepherd of the planet that we have and not destroy it. And it was all climate focused. The value propositions we're talking about, like climate is, climate change mitigation is almost the icing on the cake. There's so much that tangibly impacts day-to-day life, whereas climate change can often feel like a distant problem to many groups that, someone's going to handle it, or I don't know enough about it, or I've got today problems. I can't think about 200-year problems or 100-year problems or 50-year problems. But when you value stack well enough that you get the climate change mitigation, that's the benefit of building these renewable energy projects. But you have to have those near-term payoffs. You have to have economic prosperity, improved health outcomes, reliable power. Opportunity seems to be the biggest one here. And when you solve for those, then you get what is that greater mission along the way. You know what I mean? And I think that it's a really valuable message and narrative in light of the policy challenges that the broader clean energy industry faces with the current, administration, which is obvious, and they've been very clear about how they feel about clean energy. Um, it almost doesn't matter. Like that momentum is baked into really near-term challenges and clear solutions.
And I think you see it in our everyday weather. We know the planet is sick. We know that the environment that we're creating is having a direct reflect on our society. And I think what's really powerful about this moment in time and this opportunity that we're being given is, healing is in the environment. Once we start healing the environment, we'll start healing that relationship with ourselves, and we'll start healing that relationship with one another. And I think when we start focusing in on that, then I believe that the rest will follow. And so that's really what I'm trying to do, John, is start with working and healing the environment, because when we do that, everything else falls in place. So to your point, all this that's happening right now, like this is the way forward. And Solar Bear can't do it alone. I hear about solar bears popping up around the country, folks starting their own solar bears. I'm so inspired. Everyone out there that's listening to this, thank you. Please, you start your own solar bear, because I can't do this alone. And I used to see Solar Bear in my mind, and I don't see them anymore, John.
Hmm.
And someone told me, they said that's because Solar Bear is out there starting other solar bears. And I just thought, wow, that is so cool because I didn't think of it like that. But
Yeah.
like I said, we at Native Sun and Solar Bear, we need partners like OATI. We need folks out there that want to take this, seriously. And I just really believe that we're onto something really powerful, John.
So you've been really open about I want to work with everyone. I want to push this forward, even seemingly, competitive environments. The development community is pretty competitive. To be open and say like, let's work together and try to score some wins here. What's the playbook then? Like how do you see the the path when engaging with a new tribe? They're probably not new to you because you know everybody, but that first conversation about resiliency, electrification, here's where to start, here's where it could go, because you have to be sensitive to apprehension about one, the investment, two, here's another sales pitch, three, do I need all this? How do you tell that story, and are there some clear steps that would be helpful for those listening who may have to navigate that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to just tell folks, that, where I'm at, we created the first tribal energy development organization in the country. We've also, I personally, Solar Bear has built, numerous, solar projects in my community in Red Lake. We've installed, with our partnership with you guys, numerous charging stations. We've delivered, electric vehicles, Ford Lightnings to, my favorite is the Volkswagen Buzz. I really like that little van. And that's for the youth shelter. A couple of Kenworth trucks that are delivering food to the community. So, we need these partnerships, right, John? And I think that that's one of the incredible things that has really come out of all this is that you're starting to find out that you're not the only one thinking like this. You're not the only one doing this. And I want to say, John, I really do believe that the good attracts the good, and I really believe that that's what I'm experiencing personally, and that's what I really try to explain to these communities that I go into and I speak with them. That I don't push anything on them, obviously, but I just want to let them know that here's my track record. This is what I've accomplished. We've created the first tribal energy advisory board in the country in the state of Minnesota, a group of us, and I was a part of that group. And all the things that we've done, both policy, financial, everything, virtual power purchase agreements, studies, all the stuff. Now you see virtual power purchase agreements or virtual power purchase talk all over the country now. We were doing this like 5 years ago, putting these studies together and everything. And I'm just saying, like all these things, like I think that I bring to whatever community I'm working with, and I tell them this is what we're doing, this is how we did it. It's not easy. I bump my head a lot, but I'm willing to share everything with you because I believe that this is going to make your community better, just like it's making my community better. And real quickly, John, in the old days, right? Native people used to trade with one another, and what they would do is they would say, "Well, I've got good medicine in my community that's helping our people. We want to bring good medicine to your community because it's helping us and it might be able to help your community." And I kind of feel like the Electric Nation project, connecting all these communities through these electric vehicle charging stations, is like bringing good medicine into these other communities. It's like, John, it's like we're opening up these old trade routes. And I've always said that when we're together, we're powerful. But we can go, what's the saying, John? You can go far on your own, but together you can go further. And that's really the message that I try to convey when I go into these communities.
Well, what an endorsement of Barnes and Noble that this career was sparked. Say what you want about big box stores, but wow, the impact that they've had. Bob Blake, it was great having you on. Looking forward to seeing how this all plays out and just excited about the partnership.
Thank you, John. You're awesome.